This video will provide information about assessment for general education courses at Wayne State University. It will summarize the purpose and plan for Gen Ed assessment, what instructors will be asked to do for assessment, and how to submit Gen Ed assessment data using the Excel template. The General Education Oversight Committee, or GEOC, is the body designated by the Board of Governors to oversee the general education program at Wayne. This includes assessment of the Gen Ed program. All courses with Gen Ed designation must be designed to teach the Gen Ed learning outcomes of their designated competency area. As you can see in the screenshot of the Provost website, the Gen Ed learning outcomes are available in the General Education Program section under the Curriculum link. For example, the inquiry area of diversity, equity, and inclusion has 5 learning outcomes that describe what students taking DEI courses are supposed to learn in the course. GEOC has collaborated with instructors and students to create rubrics to assist with assessing the Gen Ed learning outcomes. Rubrics for Gen Ed assessment of the learning outcomes are available on the General Education Program website. Instructors teaching Gen Ed courses are encouraged to utilize the Gen Ed rubrics to guide the design of course assignments. One or more of your course assignments should elicit student performance on each of the course's Gen Ed learning outcomes, but not every assignment needs to do so. Instructors can choose one assignment that covers all of the Gen Ed outcomes, or information can be combined from multiple assignments to provide the data needed for the Gen Ed rubric. Instructors who design assignments with the Gen Ed rubric in mind will have an easier time when it comes to assessment. Also, it is important to keep in mind some courses may have multiple Gen Ed designations, which may mean an instructor could be asked to provide Gen Ed assessment data for more than one area in the same semester. So what will you, as an instructor teaching a Gen Ed course, be asked to do? First, look at the Gen Ed assessment rotation and timeline to see if your course's designation is scheduled for data collection this year. Assessment data will be collected for 3 competency or inquiry areas each academic year. For example, in academic year 2019 to 2020, assessment data will be collected in the fall and winter semesters for all courses designated as Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, DEI, Social Inquiry, SI, and Quantitative Experience, QE. A timeline for Gen Ed assessment is available on the General Education Program website. Second, choose one or more assignment in your Gen Ed course that demonstrates each of the Gen Ed learning outcomes. If multiple assignments demonstrate a Gen Ed learning outcome, you must decide how to combine or average the information to assign frequencies to the levels of the learning outcomes. You can get assistance with alignment of course assignments to Gen Ed learning outcomes from WSU's Director of Assessment or from the Office for Teaching and Learning. Last, if you are teaching a Gen Ed course slated for assessment, you must provide assessment data to GEOC by the end of the semester. For each rubric, there are 4 levels of learning: high, moderate, low, and no. That data will consist of the number of students meeting each level of learning, high, moderate, low, and no, on the Gen Ed rubric for each learning outcome. Next, an example of the DEI rubric and alignment will be provided. The DEI rubric is available on the General Education Program website. For each of the Gen Ed rubrics, the first column lists each Gen Ed learning outcome for the Gen Ed area in its own row. Columns 2 through 5 describe the levels of performance on the learning outcomes. There are 4 levels: high, moderate, low, and no. Where each learning outcome and level meet, a description is provided. The levels are implicational, meaning a moderate score indicates that the student has met the criteria for low and moderate. A high score indicates that the student has met the criteria for low, moderate, and high. When designing assignments, instructors should be sure to elicit performance, at least at the moderate level, which is the target level of performance for Gen Ed. Instructors should align at least some of their course assignments to the Gen Ed rubric to assess student learning of the Gen Ed learning outcomes. An instructor can create a variety of assignments that align with the learning outcome, such as one or more online discussion post assignments, short essays, longer papers, or group activities. Let's look at some learning outcomes for DEI. Learning Outcome 1 in the DEI rubric states, compare complex categories of social group memberships as they relate to our local and national contexts, democratic traditions, and contemporary struggles. An assignment for Learning Outcome 1 in the Criminal Justice course CRJ 2550, Race, Crime, and Justice, could be a group project where the instructor asks students to do the following. Using national and international data sources, describe the trends in imprisonment in the U.S. compared to other nations and how these trends vary across race or ethnicity. Learning Outcome 3 in the DEI rubric states, examine the roots of individual cultural values and prejudices and how they influence behavior. An assignment that aligns with Learning Outcome 3 could be to ask students to post responses to Canvas discussions, like, what are some examples of policies and laws that were created post-13th Amendment to permit racial bias? And Learning Outcome 5 states, demonstrate understanding of the key issues of the course by analyzing, proposing, or engaging in strategies that promote equity at the local or national level. An assignment that aligns with Learning Outcome 5 could be a short paper where the students are asked to do the following. Based on experiences and information presented in the book Crook County, how could we revise the courts and criminal justice system to be more inclusive of racial diversity? Make sure you provide specific examples from the reading to demonstrate particular problems when making your recommendations. Instructors could also use a variety of other assignments, including quizzes and exam questions. It is really up to the instructor to decide what is best. GEOC has collaborated with other entities at Wayne to develop tools to assist instructors and departments or programs with Gen Ed assessment. The easiest method for faculty is to use Canvas, but an Excel template is also available for use upon request. This video will demonstrate use of the Excel template available for Gen Ed assessment data collection. Instructors who wish to use the Excel template should contact GEOC and provide their name, access ID, course number, and section number. Then, GEOC will email the instructor the Excel template as an email attachment. Let's walk through a demonstration of the Excel template. Before you can complete the Excel template for Gen Ed assessment, you need to prepare your Gen Ed rubric scores for each student and aggregate them across each learning level for each learning outcome. Here, I'm using Excel to do this. I've created a list of the students in the class with their scores for each learning outcome in the Gen Ed rubric. Then, I've aggregated the information for the class by counting the number of students with scores of 0, 1, 2, or 3 respectively for each learning outcome. Make sure that the total for each learning outcome adds up to the same number, the total number of your students in the class. Now that you have determined the aggregated Gen Ed rubric scores for your class, you are ready to enter them in the Excel template. To access the Excel template, download the attachment sent to you from GEOC. The template is simply an Excel spreadsheet. As you can see, the spreadsheet looks a lot like the Gen Ed rubric. Each learning outcome is in a separate row, and the learning levels are in separate columns to the right of the learning outcomes. To complete the template, first enter your name, Access ID, course, and CRN number. Then simply enter the frequencies or counts of the number of students that achieved each learning level for each learning outcome. Notice the Excel template calculates the percentage in each level for each learning outcome and the total number of students. Make sure the totals for each row are the same. If they are not, you have made an entry error or miscalculated your counts. Once the data have been entered for each level and the totals for each learning outcome are all the same, save the file. Finally, email the file as an attachment to the GEOC. When GEOC receives your data, you will receive a confirmation email. Then you are finished with Gen Ed assessment data entry and submission. If you need to contact GEOC or are looking for information about the Gen Ed assessment process, please check out these links.